it is June 1st, so that means that May is over, obviously. Hey guys, it's Avery from A Very Avid Reader, and welcome back to my channel. As you can tell, I'm in a little different setting than normal. I'm visiting my parents for the weekend, so I am here in my dad's office, so that's why this looks very nice and formal. It makes me feel like I'm one of those reaction channels who like sits at a desk and they like watch videos and stuff. So give this video a thumbs up if you think I should do reactions. Today I'm going to be doing a May wrap-up video. So I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in May, and I'm also going to be talking about my TBR for June. The last time I made a wrap-up and TBR video, I think I may have only read like one of the books that I talked about on my TBR for that next month. So who knows if I'm actually going to read the books on this TBR list, because I'm really bad at having a TBR. I pretty much just pick up whatever I want to next. So we'll see. Hopefully I will read these books that I talk about. They're definitely high up on the list of ones that I want to read. So I was pretty busy during the month of May, so I didn't read as many books as I would have liked. I read 5 books this month, and I was watching another booktuber's video, and they were saying, oh, I was so busy during May, so I didn't get to read. I only read like 15 books, and I was like, shut up. The good thing is that the majority of the books that I read this month I actually really enjoyed, so I'm actually very excited to talk about them. So without further ado, let's just get started. The first book that I read in May was Supreme Courtship by Christopher Buckley. So this book I actually picked up on my Free Little Libraries video that I did because it sounded really interesting, and I was right. It was hilarious. So the premise of this book is that the current president of the United States is really angry and pissed off because 2 of his nominations for the Supreme Court have been rejected, and his nominees were like super good people, like super straight-laced, but the senator who is in charge of the committee to, I guess, approve of the nominees has a vendetta because he wants to be appointed as the Supreme Court nominee, so he finds a way to get these 2 other nominees super discredited, and he digs into their past and finds just stuff that they basically get canceled for, even though it's stuff that they should not be canceled for, but he finds a way to get the president's nominees booted out. So the president is over it, and he also really does not want to run for re-election for a second term. He's just over it. So he decides to nominate Judge Pepper Cartwright, who is the star of a reality TV show called Courtroom 6. So she is this Texan woman who is hilarious. That's why her TV show does so well, is she just says it as it is, has a huge personality and stuff like that. So his nomination of her just throws the world into chaos, and it's really funny because this book came out in 2009, but it has really similar vibes to the 2016 presidential election. So one of the reasons that a lot of people really like this Judge Cartwright is because she's not a politician, and she just says things how she is, and she's something new to not to Hollywood, to Washington, D.C., which just seems like a little bit of foreshadowing for Donald Trump. A lot of people liked Donald Trump because he was not like other politicians, and he didn't care about, you know, being a politician in the normal sense. So it was funny because as I was reading it, it was some of the things that people were saying of why they liked this judge were similar things that people said about Trump. So it was just like a little funny foreshadowing. My favorite part of the book is how funny it was. I laughed out loud multiple times while I was reading it. Just the way that they talk about Washington, D.C. and about politics, and all the characters are really ridiculous. The president is so funny. Judge Cartwright is really funny. And so is the senator who wants to become the judge instead of her. And overall, the book was really funny. So I would 100% recommend it. You don't even have to know tons about politics, I don't think. I mean, I know enough, but I still found it really enjoyable, and I thought it was really good. I don't really read much that has a lot of humor in it. I'll read books that are like have funny characters and have funny lines, but this book was so funny the whole way through. So I would definitely recommend it for anyone who's interested in like a comical book that also deals with politics. So the next book I read in May was Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan. So this was another book that I really enjoyed. The plot was very interesting. I found myself just always wanting to know like what was going to happen next, and it was really captivating in that way. So this book follows Clay, who is kind of a classic millennial in that he's graduated college and he worked at a startup for a little while, but something happened and the startup went out of business, so he finds himself jobless in San Francisco. So he sees that Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore is hiring, and he applies and eventually is given the night shift of this weird bookstore. The bookstore doesn't get much action. It's pretty much always dead, except for a few specific customers, reoccurring customers who come in and check out these mystery books. So basically the front of the store is like a normal bookstore and they sell all sorts of books, but there is a whole nother section of the bookstore which Clay calls the way back list, and they are these weird volumes that are these big kind of ancient looking books, and there are members who come in and they have a special card and they check out specific books off of this weird way back list. And Clay is told not to look in the books to see what's in them, but one day he is with his friend and his friend wants to see what it is, so they get one and they open it up, and I don't want to spoil too much of what they find in the books, but they eventually figure out that there's this weird kind of cult surrounding these books, and there's this code that all these people are trying to break, and if they break this code they think that this will happen, and it's this very interesting cult that goes back hundreds of years. So Clay and his friends, including this girl that he meets who works at Google, are basically trying to find a way to break this ancient code to figure out this big secret. The book is really interesting. It's a really fun setting. The bookstore is. For people who love books, you'll probably just enjoy the setting and the overall feel of the book. And I thought it was really interesting how the author brought in these like technological concepts that I had never really heard about, but he explained it really well and explained what they were doing, and it's just a fun book. It was really interesting. You're always wanting to know what's happening, what's going to happen next, and eventually figure out what this whole cult is about. The next two books that I read in May are the King of Scars duology by Leigh Bardugo, so King of Scars and Rule of Wolves. So I'm not going to talk too long about these because I just recently posted a whole review video of this duology, so if you want to watch that, I will have that linked below, so you can see all of my opinions on those two books. The name of the review is titled King of Scars Duology Rant Review, so if that doesn't tell you enough, then I don't know what will. So overall, I would say I enjoyed the two books, even though they were not my favorite out of the Grishaverse books. And if you have read the Shadow and Bone trilogy as well as the Six of Crows duology, then you will probably enjoy them. So you should definitely pick those up if you love Leigh Bardugo and if you love the Grishaverse. So the next book that I read in May, and the last book that I read in May, is the only book that I gave 5 stars out of all the books that I've read this month. And that book is Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his first name right. Rainer, it might be like Rainier, I don't know. So sorry about that I'm probably butchering his name. But I loved this book. And let me just say that Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookshop and Supreme Courtship, I gave 4 stars, so I really liked those books, but they weren't quite at the 5-star level, even though they were really good. But this one I did give 5 stars. And these letters are from Rilke to a young cadet named Franz Capus, and they both attended the same military academy. Franz's professor found him reading some of Rilke's poetry, and the professor knew Rilke and was able to get him in contact with him. So Franz ended up writing to Rilke and talking to him about all sorts of things. Rilke was a bohemian poet, and so Franz also wanted to be a poet, and so they started this correspondence, and this book is a collection of the letters from Rilke to Franz. But can I just say, these letters were so captivating. Rilke has such a beautiful way of writing, and he wrote about so many topics of life in these 10 letters that each letter had some different sort of insight on some different type of thing in life. In his first letter, he wrote about finding the reason or the core motive for why you want to be an artist. And so he was specifically talking about writers, talking about, you know, what is the reason that you must write, and trying to really figure out if making whatever content it is, you know, making sure that's important to you and it's not for the wrong reasons. I thought it was very applicable. I think it can be applicable to almost anything that you do. And I found it applicable to even just making YouTube videos. And, you know, it made me question and ask myself, well, am I making these just out of pure passion for it? Or am I making it so that I can gain subscribers and gain, you know, just a little bit of what feels like fame? So it really just made me reconsider and make me think about how I don't need to be so concerned about, you know, my subscriber count or how many views each video gets, because if making the content is what makes me happy, then that's all that really matters. So I really liked that. I was reading it and I was like, wow, it just really struck me. That was just one of the many things that he talks about. I think in that same letter, he was recommending an author to Franz Capus. He basically said that this author was one of his favorite authors in the world and was recommending his book to him. And he said something just really inspiring about how he doesn't need to read the reviews about the book, and about how, you know, critical reception really doesn't matter, because one book may get great critical reception that you don't really care for. You don't really care for the book, or it doesn't really apply to you. But another book might get not so great reception and you really love it and it really strikes home with you. So I thought that was interesting, especially as someone who loves to read, how, you know, obviously looking at how many stars something has on Goodreads can give you some idea if it's good or bad. If it has 1 star, it's probably not good. But just because it has 3 stars, or, you know, it doesn't have 5 stars, doesn't mean that it's not a really great book with really good content in it. But Rilke covers just a variety of topics in these letters. He talks about spirituality. He also has some really kind of modern takes on feminism, and these are from the 1900s. So from, I think, 1901 is when the first letter is written. And he talks about the relationship between a man and a woman, and how a woman doesn't need to be certain things and a man doesn't need to be certain things, but if they come together and they, you know, love each other and make each other better, then it's just good. And I really enjoyed what he talked about in that. He also talked about, you know, worries and doubt and how you can harness that instead of let it be something that's like crippling for you. And I'm an extreme worrywart. I love to worry about things, and, you know, I love to have negative thoughts about the future. And he, you know, kind of had some good insights on how to not let that ruin your life and how to harness that worry and make it something productive. It's called Letters to a Young Poet, but I really think it can be letters to a young person, to anyone. So I would 100% recommend this book. It was also a really quick read because it was 10 letters, and some of them were longer than others, but it was around 90 pages. So it was a pretty quick read, but it was by far the best thing that I've read this month. But if you read that book, definitely let me know. I would love to talk to anyone about it, and let me know what your favorite letter was, because there's 10 and each one talks about something different. So I would love to hear what letter you enjoyed out of the 10. Okay, so those are all the books that I read in the month of May. Like I said, it's not a plethora of books, but you know, it's what I could do. But let's talk about my June TBR. So the first book on my TBR for this month is a book that I actually started last night, and it's called Furious Love, Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, and the Marriage of the Century by Sam Kashner. So this book follows Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton's marriage and relationship, because it was a very tumultuous relationship and one of the most famous ones in Hollywood's history, filled with drama and passion, and all sorts of crazy stuff happens. So I have a feeling that this is going to be a really good read. Like I said, I started it, and I didn't even finish the first chapter because I started it really late last night, but it was already just really interesting. It was kind of going into the background of Elizabeth Taylor's marriages, because before she met him, she had been married 4 times before, and people in Hollywood back then, if you look at old Hollywood actors from like the 50s, they have been married like 8 times. Men and women, they just go through so many different marriages, and so it's fascinating and just crazy to think about. So I'm really interested to see what happens when they meet each other and just to know more about it. So that is the first book on my TBR. The next book I have on my TBR is also the only book that I have a physical copy of with me here at my parents', and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I know that this book is super popular and I've had it for a long time. I got it at a thrift store like years ago and just still haven't read it. I think Hannah from A Clockwork Reader says it's one of her favorite books of all time. And it sounds really interesting, so I really want to read it this month. But the first line of the book and of the synopsis is, "The circus arrives without warning." So it's basically about this traveling circus. So there's not tons of information about what this duel is, but there's a competition going between these two young magicians named Celia and Marco. And it doesn't really say what exactly it is they're competing for, but it seems really interesting, and eventually they fall into love, but there's a domino effect of dangerous consequences, and it just sounds great. It's got magicians, it's got love, it has danger. I mean, what more could you ask for? If you've read it, let me know in the comments. I know it's super popular. And yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it. The next book that is on my TBR for June is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. So I've been waiting to receive a copy of this book through the app Libby that I use, which you hook up your library card and you're able to get free ebooks sent to your Kindle, or you can read them just on your phone. So I've been waiting for a copy of this one for weeks, and I just got a notification that it is ready, which I'm excited about. But this book is about a man named Linus Baker, and I believe he's 40, and it says that he is a caseworker at the department in charge of magical youth. So he basically oversees the well-being of children who are in these government-sanctioned orphanages they're magical children. This follows him as he travels to the Marsyas Island Orphanage, where there are 6 dangerous children. And these children are a gnome, a sprite, a wyvern, an unidentifiable green blob, a were-Pomeranian, and the Antichrist. It says to determine whether or not they're likely to bring about the end of days. And he meets the caretaker of the children, who is Arthur, and it seems like there's going to be a bit of a romance between Arthur and Linus. So it seems really interesting, and I'm sure that, he will eventually grow to love the children and stuff like that. And I've just heard that it's a very heartwarming story, and that I'll be crying by the end. So I'm looking forward to that. But it has almost 5 stars on Goodreads, and a book that has almost that many stars is usually always good. Even though I just talked about not judging a book by its rating, usually you can assume that if it has a really high star count, it's a pretty good book. So that is on my list, and I am looking forward to reading that one. Okay, so the last book that I want to read in May is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. So I know that Wuthering Heights is obviously a classic, but I also know that some people love it and some people hate it. So I'm interested to see, what team I'm going to be on. And I'm looking forward to reading it because I really have no idea what the plot is about. I know that it's this big love story between Heathcliff and I cannot even remember what the girl's name is. Catherine is her name. It took me so long to find that. I don't know why. But I know that there's a love story between them two and that it's crazy. I don't know. I don't know much about it, so I'm looking forward to reading that. So we'll see. Maybe I'll do a review of it if I have strong feelings about it. I know that some people are usually in Team Austen versus Team Bronte, and so far I love Jane Austen books, so I wonder if because I love one I won't love the other, or if I'll love both. We'll see. So that is another one on my TBR. Okay, so that's it for my TBR. Hopefully I'm going to be reading more books than just 4, but those are the 4 that I specifically would like to read in the month of June. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed hearing about what I read this month, as well as seeing what I am hoping to read in June. Let me know if you've read any of these books that I talked about in the comments and what you thought of them, because I love when people tell me their thoughts on certain books in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it all the way through this video, then you're a king or a queen. You're just royalty. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. Thanks for watching once again, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!